forces were able to flank a major anti-tank obstacle, take the Soviet defenders by surprise, and open a path for tanks to cross. The German forces were able to advance to the city's main railway station, before once again meeting stalwart resistance. We gift the fatherland with a victory.
Affleck and Vin Diesel star in The Boiler Room, starting now over on Film 4. Here on Channel 4, Stalin takes centre stage as we chart Roosevelt's most disastrous decision.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honour to be invited to address you this afternoon, and thank you very much indeed, Colonel Treece, for those kind remarks. It's perfectly true that my book got to #2 on the bestseller list, beaten only by a book about Michael Jackson. In the course of writing The Storm of War and its predecessor, Masters and Commanders, it became very clear to me that the primary reason why the Germans lost the Second World War, a war that they could have won, is that Adolf Hitler, whenever the best interests of the Nazi Party bifurcated from those of the Wehrmacht, always took the former route. He always prioritized his fascism, his Nazism, over and above the best interests of the German Reich. He also saw the Second World War entirely in ideological terms, rather than in the grand strategic terms that an earlier German leader such as Bismarck or an earlier chief of staff such as Helmut von Moltke would have done. And you see this happening so often, it's so ubiquitous in the key decision-making moments of the Second World War as to be a pattern for his war fighting and an explanation for his defeat. Right at the beginning of the war, at the time of Operation Sea Lion, the projected German invasion of Britain in 1940, Hitler had only 43 operational U-boats, as against 463 at the time of the end of the Second World War in May 19, at least in the war in Europe in May 1945. Had he had 463 U-boats at the beginning of the war, had he started to build his U-boat capacity from the moment he came to power in January 1933, he would have been able to have strangled Great Britain right off at the beginning of the war. But he never thought it was necessary, never thought it would be necessary for one Anglo-Saxon nation to fight against another Anglo-Saxon nation, even though, of course, he himself had fought in the Great War across the no man's land from British regiments. This was a classic example of his of placing his Nazism, his belief in the importance, the vital centre of importance of race, as opposed to any of the other major considerations necessary. He didn't even work out what would happen were he to need to invade Britain. The various plans for the invasion of Britain, Operation Sea Lion, were still being perfected at the time of the Battle of Britain and afterwards, when there was, at that point, after the defeat in the Battle of Britain, Hitler had no realistic chance of invading. This got to the point that when the SS drew up a list of 2,820 Britons who were going to be arrested and shot on sight, the list was so haphazard and last minute that it included Sigmund Freud, who had died 2 years beforehand. It had Aldous Huxley, who had come to live in America in 1936. And when the whole list was published in, after the end of the war, once it